Hey everyone, my name is Nick Lambert. I'm the CEO of Doc Labs, and welcome to our latest live event. Today's topic is Know Your Agent, Solving Identity for AI Agents. So in this episode, we're very lucky to be joined by my esteemed guest, Peter Horadan. Peter is the CEO of Vouched. It's a US-based company offering industry-leading identity verification solutions that streamline onboarding, enhance security, and reduce fraud. Peter, how are you today? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, our pleasure. So I think this is going to be a really, really great session. And the topic that Peter and I will be discussing today, along with the help of the audience, is around agentic AI. And everyone seems to be talking about it in a way that they're thinking about all the myriad of ways that agents can help us, whether that be travel booking or making purchases, etc. But I think what seems to be lacking from the conversation in a lot of places, particularly when we know about agents potentially going rogue, hallucinating, etc., not enough time is being spent figuring out how as this technology kind of comes at us at a rapid speed, how do we actually put guardrails around these agents, protecting both the consumer, the merchant, the website, the platform. These are kind of vital things that we're going to dig into with Peter today. And so Peter is going to kind of run through a live demo, and then we'll get into some kind of Q&A, which is the relatively normal format for our webinars. But I think this is going to be a particularly good one. And then at the end, we spend a little bit of time taking some questions from the audience. If you are in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. If you have questions that occur to you as we go through the session, please just add them to the Riverside chat, and our glamorous assistant Francisco will gather up the good ones and we'll ask them to Peter at the end. And please also, if you're listening live, do let us know where you're listening from. It's always good for us to hear that. So Peter, if I could pass to you, if you'd be kind enough to provide a quick introduction both to yourself and then to Vouched, and then feel free to, we can start looking at the demo when you're ready.
You bet. Thank you, Nick. I'm thrilled to be here. As you know, I'm a huge fan of this podcast and these conversations, and I'm thrilled that you've chosen us to participate today. So I'm from Vouched. Vouched is a leader in online identity. So there are many workflows where you must have positive identity of a person. Those include banking and finance, where there's know your customer, know your business, anti-money laundering requirements that if someone might be opening an account remotely, you still need to have strong identity of that person. Others include healthcare. If you're seeing your doctor because of HIPAA and patient protection rules, and also drug prescription rules, you have to have strong identity to know who you're talking to so that you know whose medical records you might be discussing. And there's many, many other examples. And we're a leader in doing this remotely with the identity tools that we have today with physical IDs and the coming, Nick, I'm very excited about digital and mobile driver's licenses that are coming very quickly. But what we're here to talk about today is this new thing that's emerged in identity, which is agents. There's a prediction that by next year, there may be more non-human agents on the internet than there are human actors on the internet. And I'm excited about this. I think agents are going to be really, really useful. All of us will be able to have a personal assistant, and a lot of the sort of drudge work of life will be able to hand off to an AI agent. So for example, today's an example that's used all the time. Today's AI agents you can say, could you please plan a wonderful vacation for me? And it'll ask you your preferences, it'll think about it, and it'll give you an itinerary for a terrific vacation. But then it's up to you to go book that vacation, to go call the airline and call a hotel and get your restaurant reservations and rental car and everything else that you need to actually do your vacation. And that can be a lot of hours of work. Well, the advent of AI agents mean that you can just now say to the agent, could you go ahead and book all those things for me? And then it'll go out on the internet and on your behalf make all of those bookings, and then come back in just a few minutes and say, I'm all done. Here's your itinerary. So this is profoundly useful, and I actually cannot wait for this future to happen. But the reason we're talking about it on today's podcast is that this raises many, many identity challenges that, as of right now, there's not a good solution for. So let's go through how that works. There was actually a groundbreaking earth-shattering development last week where ChatGPT shipped agent mode. So if you're a subscriber to ChatGPT, you can go in and you can make your query. If you click on agent mode on the options for your query, ChatGPT will go and take action for you. So you might say to it, please go to an airline and book a plane ticket for me. And what happens next is really stunning. It says, okay, no problem. ChatGPT then right there launches a browser window, which it drives. It's automating this little browser window that you see. You then see it navigate to the airline's website. You see it go find the login dialog. And then you're sitting there at the login dialog where it says, enter your username and password. And it says, hey, go ahead and log in so that I can book your plane tickets. The user's then prompted to enter their username and password. And if there's a two-factor auth, like for example, if your phone gets a 6-digit code on it or something, you're then prompted to do that. Oh, please, the web page moves. It says, enter the 6 digits we just texted you. And you go ahead and do that. And it says, then ChatGPT says, great, looks like you're finished logging in. I'll now buy the plane ticket for you. And you can sit there and watch while ChatGPT navigates the site, finds the plane ticket, purchases it, chooses your payment method, goes all the way through and actually finishes the purchase. It's pretty stunning. There's something really big that's wrong here, though, which is we've spent decades in cybersecurity circles teaching everyone in the world to never give your username and password to any third party, that these are private information. You need to keep them private. And what just happened here? The user was caused to type into a third-party window. The URL says ChatGPT on top, to type their username and password into ChatGPT. And what happens now is ChatGPT now has a valid OAuth session key with this airline, and it can go do whatever it wants, and they say that they will only use this for good. They say, hey, trust us, nothing bad will happen. But if you've been around cybersecurity for a while, you know that the trust us not to do anything bad version of cybersecurity is really no cybersecurity at all. Obviously, I think it's a great company. I trust their intentions, but all kinds of things can go wrong. ChatGPT themselves could get hacked. They could have a rogue insider. Or even the AI. A well-intentioned AI can still make mistakes. We've all seen hallucinations. We've all seen that query where you enter a chat prompt and the AI does something you didn't expect. All of that can happen, and much, much worse. So people are using this not just for travel. People are using this at work. You might say to ChatGPT, hey, could you go into my Salesforce automation system and make a report for me? I need you to collect some data and make a report. So then it prompts you to log into your company's Salesforce information system. It's now logged in as you to your work systems. You could log into your finance and accounting system. You could figure out the health of a public company before that public company reports its results, and on and on and on. I mean, we could spend the entire podcast coming up with scenarios. But what's happened here is that you have completely delegated your entire identity now with this provider, with the airline or the Salesforce automation system or whatever, to a third party, to ChatGPT. And even if ChatGPT does a great job, this is terrible training, because what we're doing is we're training the world's users of computers that it's perfectly fine to just give your username and password to an AI agent. This is a very, very bad practice, and we've got to fix it in the world of identity.
Yeah, that's great context. And I think, Sam Altman's kind of release of that was exciting and worrying in equal measure. But we think there's maybe a solution to this, Peter, that you're going to kind of guide us through how this might look from a user perspective.
Yes, there is. So let's go over what this looks like. So in the case of ChatGPT, they're using effectively screen scraping. They are automating a browser, and they're using that browser to impersonate a person and then come log in as that person with an OAuth session key or with credentials. This is really the wrong way to do it. So Anthropic released a specification a few months ago called Model Context Protocol, or MCP for short. It's been very rapidly adopted. Last time I checked, there's over 1,000 MCP servers have been published in just a few months. What MCP is it's a way for agents to go use some service provider website. That might be an airline, it might be a Salesforce automation system or whatever. But it is an agent-native way for the agent to come in and do what it needs to do without having to do HTML screen scraping. So in that MCP service, you would expose certain functions that the agent can do, either to retrieve information or to take actions. It's a very controlled way to do it. But the MCP spec itself had several things missing if we're really going to do identity well. It talked just to the fact that there is going to be an OAuth session that the agent is operating under. And this leaves out a bunch of issues. And the OpenID Foundation did some work, went back to the authors of the MCP spec and said, hey, we need some changes. They made some changes, but not nearly enough. So let's talk about some of the problems here. The first problem is that we need to identify the agent as a separate identity whenever it's going to take action on behalf of a human. We need to have a world where it is well known that this is not the human taking this action. This is a specific agent taking action on behalf of a human. And why is that? Because what's really happening here is the human is delegating authority to this agent, right? So I might say to my agent, go buy me a plane ticket. So I want to delegate the authority to be able to buy a plane ticket. But I might not want to delegate other kinds of authority. For example, I might not want to say, well, you can also give away my airline miles to someone else. You can gift my airline miles. I might not want to let my agent do that. So we need to know that this is not Peter, that this is the agent. And then we need to track, well, what has this human delegated to this agent? So the first thing we need, and this is well known in IAM circles, this is just called, distributed authentication and delegation of roles, but we need to implement that for agents. It's not in the MCP spec today, and it needs to be there. So the first thing is we need humans to we need to know that this is an agent, and we need to know what has the human delegated to the agent. The second thing is we need to be able to track the reputation of this agent. There's going to be good agents and there's going to be bad agents. And actually, probably there's going to be a lot more bad agents than good agents. I think any of us who've been around for a while can guess that pretty quickly. And agents are going to do a really good job of being really selective with users, saying, just trust me, just give me your username and password, and I certainly won't do anything bad with it, and then I can go do stuff for you. There's going to be scam agents, fraudster agents, huckster agents. These things are all going to be invented. And it's funny, in many ways, this reminds me of email. I have a couple gray hairs here, means, we've seen a few things before. So when they invented email 50 years ago in the earliest days of computing in the 60s and 70s, it was an altruistic time. Nobody thought there'd be bad email senders. And so there's really no protection built into the email system to guard against bad senders. As a result, 50 years later, we're still dealing with the spam problem. I mean, we've kind of dealt with it, but phishing is still the number one vector for account takeover, social engineering through email, getting people to click on a bad email. You look in the spam folder, it's filled with this ungodly mess of horrible stuff. Why do we have this problem? Because when we designed email, we didn't design it with security in mind, thinking there'd be bad actors. We cannot make the same mistake as we build the agentic future of software. That would be an even worse mistake than we made with email. And so we've got to build this thinking in advance that there are going to be bad agents, and they're going to seem really good, and people are going to think, oh, there's no problem using this agent, but then it turns out to be a bad agent doing bad things. And by the way, the status of an agent can change overnight. You could have an agent that everybody trusts, but then all of a sudden it gets hacked. All of a sudden it's a bad agent, and we want to turn it off as quickly as we can. So how do we do that? Okay, so the problems we haven't solved yet. Number one, how does an agent have its own identity? Number two, how do humans delegate things to agents? Number three, how do we tell good agents from bad agents? And this is real time, because an agent might be good and then might become bad. And then number four, how do we identify the human? So the human isn't there when the agent shows up to do work. In the case I described earlier, logging into an airline, the human is there logging in. That's not what we want. We don't want the human to have to sit there and type your password every time an agent does something for you. That's going to get old real fast. We don't want to have to enter the 6 digits off of our cell phone, every time an agent tries to take an action. You might be in a meeting. You might be recording a podcast. You might be sleeping, and you don't want to be bothered constantly whenever all of your agents are doing stuff. So we need a way to identify the human being without having to have the human be present right then. Maybe the human is present at the beginning of the process to say, I'm going to prove that I'm Peter, and then I'm going to delegate stuff to this agent. But then I don't want to be involved. I want that to be durable so that you remember me and you remember my delegations to my agent. But then you're not going to send me a 6-digit code, while I'm on a date. with my wife. So we got to figure that out, right? So we also need ways to identify the human. And then the fifth thing is legal agreements. So when you buy a plane ticket, you might notice on the very bottom there's a little checkbox that says, I accept the terms and conditions of this ticket when you're buying a plane ticket. And that's a really important thing. It's actually a contract of carriage, and it limits the airline's liability. If there's a plane crash, if they lose your luggage, if there's a delay, all of this stuff is controlled by this agreement. And if you want to know how important that checkbox is, just try to buy a plane ticket without clicking the box. It's impossible. You can enter your payment information. This could be a very expensive ticket. You can click buy, and they won't let you buy it. There's all these arrows like, hey, dummy, you need to check the I accept the terms box before we'll sell you this ticket. So somewhere along the way, the airline has decided we will, no matter how much money you're offering us, we will not sell you a ticket unless you agree to that. Well, guess what? An agent cannot agree to that on my behalf. If an agent buys a plane ticket, and if an agent checks that checkbox, there's no force in effect because there's not a human being making a conscious decision to agree to that. And you might think, well, this is kind of a trivial concern. No, we just talked about airlines won't sell you a ticket unless you check the box. So what do we do now? And these checkboxes are everywhere. The I agree to terms and conditions checkbox is everywhere, and you can't move forward without checking it. So what are agents going to do? Agents cannot click those. And if you're the service provider and you're aware it's an agent that's clicking it, then there's no validity to that. So we have to solve all 5 of those problems. And that's what we've invented, and that's the demo that we have to show today. So Vouched published our idea for how to solve this. We published it back in May. We saw these problems coming. We knew that we would need a Know Your Agent framework as an industry. And so we published our contribution to the community called the Model Context Protocol Identity Specification. You can go check it out at modelcontextprotocol-identity.io, all spelled out, no spaces. And it is our solution to this. And what happens is when the agent shows up in an MCP server and says, I'd like to work on behalf of Peter Horadan, first, the MCP server looks and says, do I have any record of this agent and that this agent's authorized to work with Peter? No, I guess I don't. So it then sends a URL back to the agent saying you need to get your human to come to this URL and identify themselves. This is very much like the OAuth 2.0 protocol experience that people have when you're letting like a budgeting tool or something like that get into your finances. So if you've ever used a personal financial manager or a budgeting tool or anything that needs to connect to your bank, in the old days we used to do screen scraping. You used to give your username and password, and there were companies that would sit there and go screen scrape your bank and download the data. And it kind of worked, but it was very, very insecure. So the industry invented this OAuth 2.0 protocol where what happens is the bank says, you need to send the human being to this URL. I'm going to put my dialogue up with my URL, and they're going to be at my site. And I'm going to say, hey, budgeting tool X wants access to your bank account. Will you allow it? We need to have the exact same things for agents. And so every MCP server implementer needs to implement effectively the same protocol. You then need to ask, okay, human, what should this agent be allowed to do? And that is site specific. So for an airline, there might be buy a ticket, there might be see your itinerary, there might be cancel a ticket, use your miles, whatever, right? But do you want this agent to be able to do these things? It needs to remember that needs to be durable. Then what we give the agent is a session key scoped to that particular authorization. And then the agent comes back as itself and says, I'm going to reuse these authorizations and these delegations. And so the agent has identified themselves. The human has authorized the agent. We know what the human's authorized the agent to do, and so on. And then the final piece, when we're all done, is that the server sends a report to somewhere, to a rating agency. And we have a site that does this, but there may be others, that says this was a good agent or a bad agent. Effectively, we need Yelp for agents, where the MCP sites can have a review system and say this agent behaved well or behaved poorly. And if an agent gets too many behave poorlies, it gets a bad reputation, and people can decide, do I even want to let an agent with a bad reputation in my MCP server or not? So I've talked for a while. Let's go ahead and show a demo of what this might look like. So we're using the example of buying an airline ticket. So here we are, and this is just a made up chatbot called Atlas AI, and Atlas AI can help people book travel. And again, this is a conceptual demo, but this shows how the process will flow. So it says, how can I help you? So we're going to go ahead and say, hey, I've got a lot of travel, and so I need you to go figure out my travel and go buy me a ticket, please. So the agent says, great, I'd be happy to do that. But before we do, I need to know who you are so that I can tell the airline who you are and work on your behalf. Now, this is where I'm very excited about our integration with Truvera. Nick and team have built an amazing platform for the entire workflow of understanding identity, delegations, using digital driver's licenses. It's an absolutely terrific platform. So we're using this platform to go in and say, how do we identify the human being? And we have the option here to use a mobile driver's license, a digital driver's license. Nick, did you know that in the United States, right now, the current stat is 5% of all people who have an ID also have a mobile driver's license? That is moving. That number is going up fast.
Yeah, I knew it was around 6 million, but I didn't know it was a percentage. But yeah, and I think it's set for pretty explosive growth, but that's really good to see.
It is. Yeah, this is coming fast. And it's really exciting because it's a great experience to identify yourself online. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's use the mobile driver's license. Okay, so we're going to use our phone now to go share my license. So I'm going to scan with my phone. This is a mocked up demo, but so here we go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and scan it. And now on my phone, I'm going to be prompted to say, do you want to share your mobile driver's license? And there's a biometric. The mobile driver's license is tied by the wallet on my phone, by the security infrastructure of the phone, to my biometric. So I have to have my face or I have to have my live fingerprint in order to use this at all. That prevents someone from taking my phone and pretending to be me. Okay, so I've completed that process, and now I've proven to the system that I am Peter Horadan. Okay, so now Atlas AI is ready to book travel for me. So it says need to know your preferences, and here we go. This is where I normally travel from, and this is my budget, and I like aisle seats and whatever. But now I need to connect to my airlines. Now this is the meat here of the demo. This is what needs to change so that agents can actually work on our behalf and do it the right way. So I'm going to go ahead and connect Awesome Airlines. Now what's happened under the covers is that the Atlas AI agent sent an MCP request to Awesome Airlines. And it said, I have Peter Horadan here. I would like to do things for Peter Horadan. Will you let me? And the MCP server went and looked at its user database, said, I don't have any record that Peter has allowed Atlas to do anything. So basically, no. So what it does is it responds with an URL that says, well, I don't have any record of you. Send the human to this URL, and we'll see if the human wants to let you in and wants to delegate anything to you. Okay? So now the agent pops up a window and says, I need you to identify yourself to this airline and to give me permissions. And you can see the URL up here is Awesome Airlines. This is critically important. The URL is not ChatGPT. We need to train people to enter the username and password in the site that gave it to you, not into a third-party site. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill this in. I'm going to use my password manager here. Bloop. And by the way, the password manager works just fine. Why? Because it's got the correct URL. It's the correct site. So your password manager will work just fine. Now we get this OAuth 2.0-like dialog. Hey, Atlas AI, an agent. Now, by the way, Atlas AI is identified by its own separate digital distributed identifier. So it has a DID that's separate from mine. And part of that original request, Atlas AI identified itself, saying, I am an agent. This is my DID, and I would like to work with Peter Horadan. And then it also said, here's my human readable name, and so on. But this is all happening now under this context of this DID that Atlas AI has. So basically, do you want to allow the agent with this DID to do this stuff for you? Book flights, modify. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Oh, now, by the way, we're going to solve the legal issue here as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to say this is going to be a blanket acceptance of all terms and conditions that whenever this agent books a plane ticket for you, you blanket accept our contract of carriage for those plane tickets. This is how we solve the checkbox problem. This is how we solve the legal problem. The human is here now. So whatever the legal department needs that human to agree to so that the agent can do stuff and they still get the protections they want, that's what's going to show up here. Okay, so the human's sitting here and the human actually has to check this. So I'll go ahead and check it. Okay, and then whatever else it wants to tell you. Okay, let's go ahead and accept. Go ahead and accept. And now we're connected to Awesome Airlines. Terrific. Now, these permissions are logged. They're revocable. I can go back to the airline, say, I want to revoke. I don't like Atlas anymore, or I want to revoke or change it. They're explicit. And so it's a much more manageable and controlled system than what we have today. Let's go ahead and save them, and then off it goes. And so this is really what we wanted to show. So now the agent went ahead, and it has that durable session now that it can go and point back to me showing up and me granting it these permissions, and it used that and went ahead and bought my ticket. This is workable for cybersecurity protections where the username and password was never shared with anyone other than the person that granted it with you. The agent has a specific separate identity, right? Now, Awesome Airlines can go back to any rating service and say, Atlas behaved correctly on my site, right? Or if there's a fraud investigation or something bad happened, they can say, wait a minute, this agent performed poorly. Go back and say, hey, this is a bad agent. And what's going to happen is these agents are going to protect their reputation, just like on marketplaces or just like anywhere where there's reputation. It's very important to maintain a good reputation. If your reputation starts to become bad, people are just going to turn you off and not deal with you. So now it's going to be very important to the agent author, to the company that made Atlas AI, to preserve the reputation and curate the reputation of that agent. So this provides a strong incentive for agents to behave well and to follow policies. Okay, and then the other thing that we have is we have a durable, revocable, and auditable system for managing this kind of work of agents doing things on your behalf. So how this works is all described on our specification, model context protocol-identity.io. We do supply a rating service. Did that share it? There we go. Share this tab instead. We do supply a rating service where we manage the feedback and we track the reputation of agents. And so you can use ours if you like. And then we also have the model context protocol specification that describes in great detail how did that conversation work between Atlas AI and the Awesome Airlines MCP server to make all that happen. So those are all available to check out, and they're all available today.
Amazing.
What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, it looks. Well, I like it, so yeah, it's. I'm pretty biased, but yeah, I think it's a good. When we first kind of started speaking, Peter, it seemed to me like the whole area of agent commerce is really exciting, but it felt like companies are working on very narrow parts of it. So maybe just the delegation part, or maybe just the kind of agent to agent stuff. But what it really felt like it needed was quite a kind of comprehensive solution that dealt with, the ability to delegate authority, the ability for the kind of site to pass permissions to the agent, the ability for legal terms and conditions to be agreed to, etc. So I felt like you guys really had a very clear vision for how this would work. So I think it's a great demo as well. And I think it could continue on as well. I mean, if the other part to this is those preferences can then be reused. So if Sarah, who was the traveler in this example, decides she wants to kind of rent a car and continue her journey a couple of weeks later, she then can have those preferences and can then use those with the Atlas AI to go and book other things for her. So we get into a way of Sarah very easily sharing her preferences in a very kind of security and privacy preserving way. But yeah, really awesome demo. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's interesting. I think the people who wrote the MCP spec did a terrific job. I don't think they have the identity lens that the listeners of this podcast have or that we have. And so I think they didn't really think through these issues. And so we're pleased to present these solutions.
Yeah, fantastic.
Should we go to the questions?
Let's do it. So I think the first question, Peter, is we've talked a little bit about identity being, or you kind of mentioned identity as an afterthought with AI, agentic AI design. Why do you think the broader developer community has not focused on this area specifically? And second part to that would be, what are the risks that are posed by this? I call it an oversight.
Well, I think it's a little bit like, brushing your teeth. It's not fun, but you have to do it. You'd rather go build the demo functionality And there's a joke in our company, like demoing a login is not very fun. Like the fact that this login is secure is not particularly exciting demo, but it's absolutely required, and it's the kind of thing that's not important until it's critically important. And so, just because of the lens we had at Identity, we immediately saw that these were problems, and we offered a solution to it. In terms of what are the risks are enormous. I think that, again, I think the people that wrote ChatGPT have great intentions, but we're setting up a world where ChatGPT now has millions of current open OAuth session keys for people to core systems, to business systems, to confidential data, and so on. And it could go in, that system could go in and do whatever it wants. At an e-commerce site, if your customers are using an agent, that agent can turn right around and order hundreds of fraudulent orders and ship them to all different kind of people before you even know. That agent could turn around, even if it's acting well. It could come, for example, maybe there's an item that you don't want to sell out too quickly, a collector's item. It could, buy that very quickly. And so humans have no chance to buy that. There's lots of things that can change here. And right now, there's no control. The site owner has no control over it. And another thing we need to remember, the New York Times sued OpenAI, saying you trained your LLM on our data. That's a copyright violation, and you owe us damages. Well, the judge has granted the New York Times a subpoena to all chat logs, whether they've been deleted or not, whether they contain confidential information or not. The New York Times can subpoena all chats. That means every chat you've ever had with ChatGPT can be subpoenaed by the New York Times. And so if ChatGPT is going into your Salesforce automation system, let's say, and downloading your prospect list, tomorrow that prospect list could be sitting on the desk of someone at the New York Times reviewing this subpoena. This is not how you want to treat your confidential company information. So I think the risks are massive that these, and there's the training issue that we talked about up top, that we're undoing decades worth of security training of teaching people never to share your credentials with anyone. We're just undoing that. And so the risks are pretty massive, there will be other agents beyond ChatGPT. And even if ChatGPT is perfect, other agents won't be perfect. And these agents will have logged in live sessions as the human to go do whatever they want. It's incredibly scary.
Yeah, the privacy ramifications are very significant. You spoke a little bit, or a good bit, Peter, when you're running through the demo about this identity handshake. And of course, we have identity access management systems that are kind of built up over decades. Can they be adapted, do you think, to this kind of new way of delegation? Or do we really require a kind of new identity layer to take care of this stuff for us?
No, that's one of the things that we're the most excited about. So the means of proving your identity can be very flexible. And that's one of the things that's great about our integration with the TrueVera platform. For example, rather than use a digital ID, you could use a reusable verifiable credential to sort of cut down on the friction there. You could use a username and password. You could use a physical ID where the person holds it up to the camera. That's Vouched. We have a great business at Vouched identifying people with their physical IDs. So you could use a distributed identifier, a decentralized identifier that from a blockchain. You could use any form of ID that you want, and the TrueVera platform supports all of these. And so the service provider, in this case the airline, but whoever's hosting this MCP server, can decide, well, this is what I need to be convinced that the human I'm thinking of is on the other end. And reusable verifiable credentials have a lot of potential here.
And how does this play in, Peter, do you think? I mean, I know that you're in North America just now, but you literally need to live on the moon to avoid conversations about EUDI and all of that kind of rolling out in Europe. How does it play into that? Do you see these kind of European identities that are probably going to start to we're going to start to see those, I suspect, towards the end of next year, the end of 2026. Do you see those becoming a kind of reliable kind of foundation, if you like, for this human identity layer and this part of MCPI?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they are talking about it on the moon, probably. But so, yeah, as you know, the EIDAS regulation is that by November 2026, all 27 member countries must support a digital ID wallet. And by the way, as far as I can tell, every EU country will be issuing their own wallet. So there's going to be 27 wallets, different wallets to integrate with. That's again why you need a platform like Truvera to help you with that. But it's a very interesting capability that comes from these EUDI or UD wallets. So, like for example, they're going to replace notaries because you can do digital signing with your digital ID. I mean, think about how digital document signing works today. You get this email, it says sign a document. You click, it says, click to do your signature. It makes this little cursive thing and sticks it in there. It sort of is proof that you've signed it, but not really, because anyone who got to your email could sign it. And there's plenty of cases where, you might forward that email to someone else saying, what do you think of this? And then they click it and they sign it, but it's got your name. And it's kind of messy. And, it works, but it's messy. Well, UD wallets can specifically be used for digital signing. So you can go in there and use your digital ID with those biometric we verified your face or your thumbprint or whatever, and then you signed a document with it. The other thing that's really interesting that we actually haven't covered yet is all digital identity protocols support the sort of selective sharing of information. So you could say, I only want to share the fact, a digital prove all the way back to the state's own certificate. So a very strong cryptographic proof that I am over a certain age. Let's say I want to rent a car. I might say that I'm over 25 to rent that car, but then not share, other things that I don't want to share about myself. Or there's also, there are grown-up activities that the government wants you to prove you're a certain age to engage in those activities. People tend to want to preserve their privacy. We have conflict there. So digital IDs can solve that issue as well, because you can selectively share whatever you want. And again, all of that kind of comes back into the identity, where if the service provider says this agent can work for you, but I only need to know X, I only need to know, this about you. I don't need to know other things. That can all be supported. It's a very exciting new world we're moving into. But really, there's sort of this dual. There's two major things changing in the world of identity at once: the advent of digital driver's licenses, or digital IDs, which produces all kinds of new capabilities, and then the introduction of agents or non-human actors who are going to show up, and as we just talked about, need an identity all to their own. And then humans are going to need a way to delegate things to those new non-human actors. And this is all happening fast. UD wallets by November 2026. I think the prediction is 50% United States mobile driver's license adoption by the end of 2027. So this is all happening very quickly. And agents, they're already here, whether we want them to be or not. There's agents on your site right now doing stuff, and you're not even aware of it. By the way, we have a tool at Vouched that can detect that. Go check it out.
Yeah, that's great, Peter. The other thing, we kind of spoke a little bit to Paul Grassi from Amazon, came on a few months ago now, I suppose. Yeah. And when you have a player, this is Amazon, the e-commerce store, not AWS, they're looking to integrate MDLs by the end of this year. And so when you get a player with that clout and applies that level of utility to MDLs, I think it can only be good for really growing adoption quickly. So as you say, very much the perfect storm of all these different aspects coming together, which makes it a very exciting space to be in. On the business model side, Peter, if I can get into that a little bit, of course, with all of these things, we have to figure out how do we make money as businesses, providing this value as well. How are you guys thinking about, who pays for agent verification, for example, or these reputation services? Have you thought through and articulated how that could work?
Yeah, I think in our world, so we've released the Model Context Protocol -identity specification completely for free. It is an open specification. We're talking to standards bodies such as the OpenID Alliance about adopting it as a standard or modifying it. We think that the industry needs a standard here. We think that the rating of agents is also a free service that we're providing. We think that it should be free to understand, is this a good agent or a bad agent? Just like Yelp today, for instance, it's free to go understand, is this a good or a bad, place that I want to go visit? Where we intend to make money is that anyone with an MCP server has work to do. They're going to need to address these issues. We have a server product that implements everything we've talked about in this call for MCP authors. It's available now. Anyone who's interested, we'd love to talk to you about it. But if you're asking how are we going to make money, we're going to make money by selling a security server, or it's a SaaS product. I didn't mean to say server like it's on premise. It's a SaaS offering that works alongside your MCP server to provide all the identity functions that we've just discussed.
Yeah, very good. And do you think as well things like other vendors could offer kind of private kind of registry, reputation registries as well, or additional features and guarantees to offer a range of different revenue models, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think the industry will definitely evolve that way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I mean, just continuing on this thread, there's obviously different levels of assurance, from, I don't know, buying something, an age-restricted product online to booking travel. And then we get into kind of higher assurance or higher risk sectors such as healthcare, finance, and things like that. Do you see any additional safeguards needing to be added for these either more regulated industries or more kind of sensitive pieces of data?
Yes, and I think again, I think that's up to the service provider to understand what is your own regulatory requirement, and then how do you go implement this. For example, financial institutions have a very well-defined need for how they'll go identify people and what that looks like, and they need to talk to their regulators about, well, digital IDs are coming along. Can I use that? I think it's better. Is that going to be acceptable to you if when you come audit me, I show you a bunch of records of digital IDs, right? Or reusable verifiable credentials. They need to think that through. Whereas other providers might make a completely different decision for whatever works for them. They may say, hey, I don't have any regulatory requirements and I love a decentralized ID. So I think every service provider is going to have to look at their own business. I couldn't help but notice a question go by. Somebody said, what's to stop an agent from using a different digital ID, or distributed ID, different DID every single time? So in other words, every time the agent shows up, it just creates a brand new one. Well, we have a great answer to that from the world of spam email. So much stuff is like, as they say in Galactica, all of this has happened before, and it will all happen again. So if we go look at spam email, well, how does that work? Anytime you stand up a new email server, it's in jail for about 6 months while everyone tries to determine, is this a good email server or not? And you get a very suspect rating on your emails if you stood up your email server yesterday. I think the same thing's going to be true for agents. Sure, you can set up an agent, you can have a DID, but that DID's going to have a warm-up period where the agent will not be trusted or might be trusted only in a sandbox or a very limited way in the beginning. If nothing else, it's a risk, it's a flag, it's a risk factor to say, wait a minute, this agent DID was first seen yesterday. So obviously there will be new agents, but it's certainly something for us to look at to understand what's really going on here. So that's how to handle that. I think the email world has a great solution to that.
Yeah, it's tempting not to pick off some of those questions as you see them flash across the screen. So totally forgiven for that. Yeah. There's a similar kind of question. I'm kind of likening it to a similar topic. How are you thinking about kind of within, I guess maybe across companies, Peter, those agent-to-agent interactions? Are you seeing that in the same way that you just described for email? But how do you imagine that will be that would work? So agent-agent interactions between companies at scale.
I think you have the exact same issues. Each agent needs to have its own ID. Each agent needs to understand the reputation of the other agent. And each agent needs to have some set of delegations or capabilities that have been given to it of what's allowed for it to do and what's not allowed for it to do. And those things need to be revocable and they need to be audited and everything else. So, having an agent on the other end instead of an MCP server, it's maybe a distinction without a difference. I'm not sure it changes the calculus because we have all the same security problems.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. So final question from me, and then we'll definitely dive into those audience questions. Peter, I can tell you're desperate to get into some of those. So if you were advising a CTO today, an enterprise CTO, what was the first step that they should take in your view to prepare for agent-based interactions if we're starting from scratch, especially when they think about identity infrastructure?
Well, I hate that I have to say this, but if I was advising an enterprise CTO, I would say right now, go turn off all ChatGPT access to your systems. There are tools for doing this. Most companies have an OAuth server. You can add a callback or a additional authentication to that OAuth approval process when people log in, and you can go look at the user agent string. Right now, ChatGPT does have a unique user agent string, and you can understand, is it ChatGPT? If it is, block the login. I would absolutely not allow this current manifestation of how this AI agents are happening into your systems. It is an enormous security hole, and you are at massive risk. And so, to my mind, this is a SEV1, a P1 activity of go today and get your team to turn off ChatGPT access to all your systems. The way it's being done now, where users are giving ChatGPT their passwords, it's logging in as them with you having no idea what's actually going on. That is intolerable, and you should not allow it. So we have a tool for that, if you like, but also you could do it just by sort of amending or configuring how your OAuth authentication works on your system. That's the first thing I would do. And then the second thing is stay abreast and follow this, because we as an industry will come up with the right way to do this. Agents are an incredibly important part of our future. They're going to be profoundly useful. We want to make this work right. And there will be a day when it's implemented in a way that you will be able to accept, and then go ahead and turn it on then. And then also think about MCP. If you have a website, you need to have a MCP server on top of it. And basically say, agents go here, so that the agents come in, they see the functions you're offering, they know the way that you want them to behave. You can use these security protocols that we've been discussing. So immediately today, turn off any agentic access to your internal systems where they're trying to do stuff on behalf of your users, and then form a plan for how to have an MCP server and govern this the correct way.
Very good. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're into the audience questions now, Peter. So I'll just start moving through these. Thanks, Francisco, for organizing these for us. So we have Jonathan. Jonathan, excuse me, thanks for your question. Jonathan is asking, are there any plans to open source the SDK libraries?
Yes, so we've published them, and we're happy to open source them. I can talk to you about that afterwards. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So a question now from Wesley. Wesley's asking, how does MCPI prevent or mitigate risks from man-in-the-middle attacks, agent spoofing, or credential leakage? Are there formal threat models available?
So that's described in the specification. So the DID includes a public-private key pair. So when the agent shows up with a DID, they can use that same DID to sign messages. And so the man-in-the-middle attack is prevented in several ways, but that's one of them. The agent shows up and it signs its request that proves that they have that DID. Now that agent needs to protect their private key material. If they lose a private key, it's just like any normal public-private risk. If you lose your private key, you're in some trouble. But that it's built on the DID having a public-private key pair and then using that in the communications.
Okay, thank you for that. Emma is asking, who creates the agents and what is the commercial model? So I think the commercial model you kind of described a little bit already, Peter, but creating these agents, who's doing that?
Well, anyone can create an agent. There's actually agent creation platforms that have already popped up. They're pretty fun. It makes it really easy to create an agent. So who can create an agent that, like, this is sort of the same question as who can create a website? Anyone. And there will be platforms that make that really easy. In terms of getting a DID, it's very easy to generate a DID. There's lots of tools for that. Part of our SDK includes something can generate a DID for you, but anyone can generate a DID. It's quite similar to creating a GUID or creating a public-private key pair. You just generate the right material, and there's a standard and protocol for DIDs. So anyone can do it. You can probably ask ChatGPT to do it for you.
Ironically. And I think the key thing is here is the kind of solution being offered here is not imposing you must use, you've not built an agent that you're expecting people to use. The whole idea is people can bring and build whatever agent they want, and then they can get the security benefits of plugging into your solution after that.
Right. Yep.
All right. Jonathan, thanks for the second question. Does it work with FIDO to passwordless websites?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's referring to passkeys, but the idea is to work with any kind of human identification that the service provider will accept. So, for example, if the service provider has issued you a passkey, and then during that time when you show up as the human to say that yes, I'm okay with this agent help, if you use your passkey, then if that's what the service provider wants, then great.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that, Peter. John is now asking, and I think the answer to this is yes, but are all the interactions securely auditable? So I guess when agents do things on the behalf of a user, are these right. all auditable?
So that's up to the implementation. Whoever implemented the MCP server It's up to them to keep a log, an audit log of everything that's happening. It's certainly a best practice to do so. And our tools that we provide are fully audited, and that's, it's a big part of what we think needs to change. You need to audit log. This agent showed up at this time and did this for this human. That needs to be audited because there will be problems, and we're going to have to do investigations, and those investigations are going to need that data to understand what happened. So yes, but the answer to the question is it is up to whoever implemented the MCP server to do that auditing, that logging.
Yeah. But best practice to keep the logging. Perfect. Wesley's asking, is there a cryptographic trust chain linking user consent, agent identity, and delegated actions? And how is this enforced and made transparent?
Yeah, another great question. So that's an implementation detail for whoever implements the MCPI server that's managing this. So there's an MCP server. We've created a vouched MCPI server. Anyone can create an MCPI server that talks MCPI to implement all the security stuff we talked about earlier on the podcast. That is an implementation detail as to how does that MCPI server implementation store the delegation and everything else. You certainly could store it in a blockchain. You could store it in a data. You could store it in any data store that you like. That's an implementation detail for the server maker to decide. And again, MCPI is an open specification. Anyone can go implement it.
Yeah, and a second part to Wesley's question, Peter, what are the best ways for independent developers to get involved? I guess maybe working with maybe MCPI to make improvements. Are there other ways that developers could get involved?
Yeah, that would be terrific. We are hiring, by the way, if anyone would love to work on this. We have some great openings. I would also say go create an agent. I mean, we are in, I'm a little older, and I remember in the 90s people saying, oh, I missed out on the computing revolution. You'd watch some .com IPO and feel like, oh, I really missed out. Well, 30 years later, here we are still building it, right? It actually was the early days. And I feel the same way about AI. I feel like we're in the very earliest days of this. It's going to continue for 30 more years. There's going to be all of these new twists and directions that none of us have anticipated yet. And that's where we are. So go build an agent and ride the wave as this all evolves.
Very good. Timothy is asking, does MCPI in the current thought process, approach, take into account post-quantum and what that means for the security of your DID?
Well, it does in that the cryptography methods are selectable. So when we do have post-quantum cryptography, you could choose that as your cryptographic method.
Very good. And last but not least, Peter, we've got through all these questions. Wim is asking, that's Wim or Will, how is it ensured that only the correct agent has access to the private key, and what prevents other agents from having access to it?
So that's a standard question about how do you protect your private key. So in any asymmetric cryptography system, it is a duty of the person with the private key to keep it safe and to not let anyone else have access to it. If you let someone else have access to it, then you've given up all the protections that you might have from that public-private cryptography. So the answer to that question is really the same as for any other public-private key pair cryptography system. You've got to keep your private key private.
Yeah, very good advice. And Peter, is there anything we have amazingly? Your answers have been so sharp that we've actually managed to get through all the audience questions, and there certainly were a lot for this session, a lot of interest there, which is really great to see. Is there anything you would like to leave the audience with before we wrap up this session? Any kind of nugget of advice or any kind of crystal ball advice that you want to pass on to us?
Well, thank you for listening. We would love to build this with you. If you have comments or questions, I'd love for you to reach out to me personally, and the team would love to talk to you about any questions you have, any feedback you have, ideas you have for how this will evolve. We're really excited to be alive and here working on identity at this time and place, because two major changes are coming at the same time that are going to cause every single business in the world to rethink all of their workflows. And that's digital IDs. That's the fact that online you can request a strong cryptographic proof that this is exactly the human that they say they are. And it is very easy. It is as easy as putting your thumb on your phone. It's much easier than digging 6 digits out of your email or solving a CAPTCHA. All of those methods, the 6 digits in the email, the captcha, all that stuff, that's all going to be replaced with, oh, just give me your ID and put your thumb on your phone. So number one, the fact that you can positively identify a human very easily with the digital identification is going to upend tons and tons of workflows. Just think about password reset as just a simple example. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're in a hotel, and a physical, real hotel, and you have that moment where you close the door behind you and you're like, oh no, I left my card key in there. You go down to the front desk and you say, I need a new card key. What do they say? Do they say, no problem, I'm going to send 6 digits to your email, go dig them out, tell me the 6 digits, and I'll give you a new card key? No, they don't. They say, show me your ID. And you show them the ID. It's the most natural thing. No problem with it. Another thing, let's say you're buying a laptop at a physical store, and you go to the front desk and it's over the limit, and they say, oh, happy to, thank you for the credit card, but I also need to see your physical ID so I can sell you this high value item. They don't say, I'm going to send 6 digits to your email. Could you go dig out the 6 digits to your email, and then I'll let you buy the laptop? Why do we do that online? Well, we do that because there is friction with requesting a physical ID. Vouched specializes in this. We have a process. Most people do it in another 10 seconds, but it's an unusual experience. That is going to change because once people realize that sharing your digital ID is as simple as just putting your thumb on this thing, that's going to happen 3-4 orders of magnitude more often than physical IDs are requested today. So that change is coming, and it's going to upend our workflows. I predict every password reset in the future will be done by showing your digital ID, not with 6 digits to your email, because that is a very phishable, right? It's very low security and it's very annoying. Nobody likes doing this. So it's low security. You get phished with it. It's a fraud vector. There's tons and tons of fraud attacks that have come from password resets via email. I get in your email, I own your life because I can change all your passwords. So that's going to be replaced with a physical ID. And then that's one workflow of very many. Many, many workflows are going to be upended and changed once it's possible for people to prove who they are with the digital ID. And then the second thing is agents. We now have these non-human actors who are going to show up and start doing stuff on our behalf. And they're going to have to prove who they are. They're going to have to prove that they're trustworthy. And they're going to have to act in the ways that we've allowed them to act. And so this is going to cause every business in the world to rethink their workflows. Because now I can get a person to prove they're human, and I do need to take into account the fact that there's non-human people showing up, participating, and what do I want them to do? So it's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be an identity. And I'm really looking forward to all of us building this future together.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess, the time to act on this is now. This is, if AI is taught anything, everything happens at some kind of exponential speed. It's not going to be something that happens in a few years' time. So this is something that I think people really need to be starting to understand now. And I guess the question remains, Peter, what will we do when we have all this time available because we're not having to book these horrible flights and travel arrangements ourselves? It'll be amazing to see what we all get up to. But thank you very much for coming on. This is Peter Horadan, CEO of Vouched, and taking us through knowing your agent, solving identity for AI agents. Thanks to everyone for listening. And if you signed up, we will be sending out the kind of edited version of this presentation and also some kind of takeaways for you as well. But thanks to everyone for joining, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.